I wish to acknowledge the Darkinjung people as traditional custodians on the land on which I live and work. I pay my respects to the elders past and present and recognise their continuing connection and contribution to the land.
Immunisation Foundation of Australia. Supporting immunisation, saving lives.
The Immunisation Foundation of Australia is a non-profit working to save lives through education and advocacy for vaccine prevention of disease. Welcome to Matter of Vax. I'm your host, Steph O'Connell. Join me and find out what is Matter of Vax.
Shingles. It's a painful condition that can last for a few weeks, or for some, symptoms can linger for years. The good news is you can protect against it. What is shingles? What are the symptoms? And with a few vaccines available, which vaccine is right for you? Dr Paul Van Buynder is a public health physician who holds a professorship in the School of Medicine at Griffith University with a focus on vaccinology. He's a past president of the Australian Immunisation Coalition. Paul is the author of over 70 book chapters and referred journal articles. Welcome, Dr. Buynder.
Thank you for having me on.
We're here to talk about shingles. It's really common, and I think most Australians aren't really aware of just how common it is.
Shingles, sadly, occurs to around 150,000 Australians every year, and the number of people developing shingles each year is actually on the increase. 95 to 98% of Australians over the age of 50 are at risk for the development of shingles. 1 in 3 people develop it during their lifetime, and by the time you get to 80, 50% of the people at that age will develop shingles. So this is a very, very common disease. Both my father and my sister develop very severe shingles and have chronic consequences. So within my family, I've seen just how nasty a disease this can be. And usually when I talk to patients about the disease and the vaccines, they know somebody in their family who's had the disease or they've had it themselves. So this is very important from the point of view of the breadth of people who are developing it each year.
What are the longer-term consequences of infection?
Well, shingles starts off as a painful disease. It occurs because people develop chickenpox when they were younger. And chickenpox, particularly if you're very young, is a relatively mild, annoying disease. But even though you get better, the chickenpox virus doesn't leave the body. It stays in one of the dorsal root ganglions, which are the ganglions near the spine. And at certain stages, when your immune system is low and you're no longer producing the important memory T cells that stop it coming out, the virus comes out in that particular nerve. And so what we see is a rash over one side of the body only and in one dermatome. So it might be a circle rash around half the chest, it might be on the face, and it might be somewhere else, but it doesn't spread to other parts of the body. It's just where that virus came out of that nerve. And the virus actually damages the nerve itself. And so you can have not just the acute phase where you get the rash, the pain, the headache, but it can then go on so that you have pain in that area that can persist for months and even years in some cases. And so this is what we call post-herpetic neuralgia. And we have very, very poor treatments for this actual rash itself and the pain. There are other complications that happen. About 1 in 6 people actually get this rash over their face and around their eye, what we call herpes zoster ophthalmicus. And those people can get not just the shooting pains behind their eyes for years, and this is what happened to my sister, but they can actually damage the eye and sight itself. And so in rare occasions, people can actually lose vision in the eye because of that. So this is the sort of disease that we want to stop because we're so poor at managing it.
Let's talk about vaccines. There are a couple out there. What are they? What's the difference? Should I be paying for a vaccine for shingles? And what's the role of chickenpox?
We now vaccinate children against chickenpox at 18 months of age. Many doctors in Australia recommend that children have a second dose, even though the government doesn't pay for the second dose. And so we give one dose and we hope that's enough for you never to get chickenpox. In other countries, they were worried that if that chickenpox vaccine only lasts 10 or 15 years, then A, you'll get chickenpox when you're older, and that's a much nastier disease. And B, you'll still have the virus in your body so you can get shingles. Because the vast majority of Australians already had chickenpox, we now have 2 vaccines that we give to older people, and those vaccines are 14 times the amount of the vaccine that we give children. The first one that we got in Australia was a vaccine called Zostavax, and we didn't use it a lot to start with because it had to be kept frozen, which was very difficult in general practice settings. But now we have one that doesn't need to be kept frozen. And the government pays for this vaccine for everybody from the age of 70 and upwards. And there are a number of problems with that vaccine. The government only pays for it in those older age groups, and people really need to be protected before the age of 70. So that's one problem with it. But the major problem with this vaccine is that it's a live virus. And live viruses can go haywire in your body if you don't have a good immune system. And there are a long list of why GPs should not give it to particular people. People who are immune suppressed, people who've had cancer treatment, people who are taking a special biologic for arthritic and autoimmune conditions. So we've had a problem with this Zostavax vaccine in that it was a risky vaccine if you gave it to somebody who didn't have a strong immune system to be able to respond to it. And they were doubly cautious because since we've been using it, there have been 2 deaths from the vaccine itself in Australia. Over the last few years, a second vaccine has become available. That vaccine is called Shingles, and it has a number of benefits over the one that we currently fund. Firstly, it is not a live vaccine, and that means it can be given quite safely to everybody in the target age groups. It's licensed from 50 and above so that you can give it to people starting earlier. It's much more effective than the old Zostavax, and it lasts much longer. We've got data now that says overseas where they've been using it for 10 years, this vaccine still works. The negatives of this are that it's 2 doses and the company charges somewhere between $550 and $600 for the 2 doses, depending on where you get it. And so when I'm talking to my pensioner patients, there is a major disincentive for them to get the vaccine. So we're not getting it used as much as we should. Probably the most positive thing that's happened over the last couple of months is that now the PBAC, the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee, has had another look at Shingrix, and they've made a decision that they think it's cost effective and beneficial for this to be given to Australians over 70, to be given to Indigenous people in Australia over the age of 50 and under the age of 50 or 70 who've got immune suppressive conditions. It's not free for anybody, but we hope within the next year it'll become free for older people, older Indigenous Australians from 50, and for some people with immune suppressive conditions. So make sure that you're accessing this as soon as you can. Should people who aren't entitled to a free vaccine, and there'll be a lot of them, even when it comes on the National Immunisation Program, get a vaccine? In my view, yes. The new vaccine stops, 85, 90, 95%, depending on how long since you've had it. And because it's such a great vaccine, I think it's important that everybody accesses it, even if they have to pay for it. Explore it with your family. I gave unfunded vaccines to my wife on Valentine's Day.
Good on you.
That's another option. Flowers are dead in 10 days. Chocolate goes straight to your thighs. But shingles vaccines are a lifetime reminder of the love your partner has for you. We've been dealing with the SARS-CoV-2 virus for the last few years. One of the things that COVID-19 infection does is it actually interferes with your immune system as well. And so it's just yet another reason to make sure that you get yourself protected against shingles, so that if you pick up COVID, that you don't then end up getting shingles as a secondary consequence of that.
And importantly, Australia has people like you out there who advocate for better access to vaccines. I want to thank you for taking the time to outline shingles to us, but more importantly, to help us understand what we can do to prevent it and how important it is to ensure that we get the vaccine information that we need and take action.
Pleasure.
If you've enjoyed Matter of Vax, please subscribe and share with your friends. You can also follow us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. For more Matter of Vax podcast and video education on this and other vaccine-preventable diseases, visit www.ifa.org.au.
The Immunisation Foundation
of Australia is a non-profit working to save lives through education and advocacy for vaccine prevention of disease.
Immunisation Foundation of Australia. Supporting immunisation, saving lives.